Have you ever paused to ask the question, what are the hidden forces inside my own body that make or break my erections? Most men chalk erection struggles up to age, stress, or just one of those things. But what if I told you there are 6 very specific, avoidable biological forces that can undermine erectile function? Not as a symptom, but as root causes. And that these forces are deeply tied to your metabolism, hormones, circulation, sleep, stress response, and cellular health? Here's what's really going on inside your body when an erection fails. An erection is essentially a finely tuned vascular and neurological event, a symphony of blood flow, signaling molecules, hormones, and metabolic signals working together. If just one of the key players in that system is off, whether due to chronic inflammation, insulin imbalances, elevated stress hormones, or damaged blood vessels, the whole process falters. This isn't about a lack of effort or desire. It's about physiology, and physiology responds to the choices you make every day. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your penis is like a garden hose. For a strong flow, you need 1. Clear pipes, 2. Positive pressure, and 3. A control valve that opens at the right time. If the hose is kinked, clogged with gunk, or the valve sticks, the water won't come out with force. In your body, those pipes are your blood vessels and endothelial cells. The pressure depends on heart health, nitric oxide signaling, and circulation. And the valve is controlled by nerves and hormones like testosterone and nitric oxide pathways. Micro damage in any of these systems, even if you don't notice it elsewhere, can diminish erectile response. What the research shows is clear. Lifestyle and metabolic health are not peripheral to erectile function, they are central drivers. Large, long-term cohort studies find that obesity, smoking, and lack of physical activity nearly double the risk of developing erection difficulty over time, while higher activity levels are protective. That's exactly why this topic matters, not just for intimacy, but for longevity, metabolic health, and vitality. Erectile function doesn't happen in isolation. It requires healthy circulation, balanced hormones, strong metabolic control, optimized liver and vascular function, good sleep architecture, and stress management. Each of those systems affects energy, fat loss, mental focus, and aging biology, not just your sex life. In this video, I'm going to break down the 6 biggest things men unknowingly do that destroy erections from the inside out, and more importantly, what you can change starting today. No shame, no surface-level fixes, just root cause thinking and practical science-backed solutions. And if this is helpful so far, consider subscribing. I post content like this every day, so you can age stronger and live with more vitality, naturally. The first and most destructive thing you can do to your erections is chronically elevate your insulin levels. This is the silent driver behind more erectile dysfunction than most men realize. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Every time you eat refined carbohydrates, sugar, ultra-processed snacks, sweetened drinks, or even large portions of starch without metabolic control, your blood sugar rises. In response, your pancreas releases insulin. That's normal. Insulin's job is to move glucose out of the bloodstream and into cells. The problem begins when insulin is elevated all day, every day. Chronically high insulin creates a state called insulin resistance. Over time, this damages the endothelial cells, the delicate inner lining of your blood vessels. These endothelial cells are responsible for producing nitric oxide, the molecule that allows blood vessels to relax and expand. And an erection is fundamentally a nitric oxide event. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your blood vessels are flexible rubber tubes. Nitric oxide is what allows those tubes to soften and widen so blood can rush in. But when insulin is chronically high, it's like pouring syrup into the lining of those tubes. They become inflamed, sticky, less responsive. They lose their elasticity. Without proper nitric oxide signaling, blood cannot fully engorge erectile tissue. What the research shows is that erectile dysfunction often appears 3 to 5 years before a major cardiovascular event. That's because penile arteries are smaller than coronary arteries. Damage shows up there first. So when erections weaken, it's often an early warning sign of metabolic and vascular dysfunction. Now let's go one layer deeper. High insulin also suppresses sex hormone-binding globulin, SHBG, which alters testosterone balance. It promotes fat storage, particularly visceral fat, which further worsens insulin resistance. It increases inflammatory cytokines that damage vascular signaling. This becomes a self-reinforcing loop. High insulin, vascular damage, reduced nitric oxide, weaker erections, more metabolic decline. The good news? This is reversible. Here's a simple protocol to restore insulin sensitivity. First, compress your eating window. A 12 to 14-hour overnight fasting window is a powerful place to start. If you finish dinner at 7 p.m., don't eat again until 9 a.m. Second, prioritize protein and fiber at your first meal. Eggs, Greek yogurt, sardines, or grass-fed beef with vegetables blunt glucose spikes dramatically compared to cereal or toast. Third, reduce ultra-refined carbohydrates. Focus on whole foods, leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables, berries, legumes, quality fats. Fourth, walk after meals. A simple 10-minute walk post-meal significantly lowers blood sugar spikes. Fifth, consider magnesium glycinate, 200-400 mg in the evening, and omega-3 fatty acids to support insulin signaling and endothelial repair. You don't need extreme keto to see benefits. You need metabolic stability. If this is helpful so far, consider subscribing. I post content like this daily to help you fix the root causes, not just chase symptoms. Remember this clearly. An erection is a vascular event. A vascular event depends on nitric oxide. Nitric oxide depends on healthy endothelium. Healthy endothelium depends on stable insulin. Fix the insulin, protect the vessels. The rest often follows. The second thing that quietly destroys erections is excess visceral fat, particularly abdominal fat, and the hormonal chaos it creates. This is not about aesthetics. This is about endocrine function. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Visceral fat, the fat stored deep around your organs, is metabolically active tissue. It is not passive storage. It behaves like an endocrine organ. It secretes inflammatory molecules like TNF-alpha and IL-6. It increases oxidative stress. And most importantly for this conversation, it alters testosterone metabolism. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine testosterone as a signal sent from your brain to your body that says, maintain muscle, support libido, preserve vitality, enable strong vascular response. Now imagine visceral fat as a factory that intercepts that signal and rewrites it. Fat tissue contains an enzyme called aromatase. Aromatase converts testosterone into estradiol, a form of estrogen. The more visceral fat you carry, the more conversion happens. So instead of circulating freely to support sexual function, muscle mass, and nitric oxide production, testosterone gets diverted. Lower testosterone doesn't just reduce libido, it directly impairs nitric oxide synthase, the enzyme required to produce nitric oxide in penile tissue. That means less vasodilation, less rigidity, slower response, but it doesn't stop there. Visceral fat also increases insulin resistance, which we just discussed, and raises inflammatory markers that damage endothelial cells. So now you have a dual hit: reduced testosterone signaling, impaired vascular responsiveness, and because low testosterone reduces muscle mass, your resting metabolic rate declines. That makes fat loss harder, which increases aromatase activity further. It becomes a hormonal feedback loop. Now here's something critical that many men misunderstand. Low testosterone is often treated as the primary problem, but in many cases, it's secondary to metabolic dysfunction. If the liver is overloaded, if insulin is chronically elevated, if sleep is poor, if visceral fat is high, testosterone production and signaling suffer downstream. So instead of asking, how do I raise testosterone? The more powerful question is, how do I remove the metabolic barriers suppressing it? Here's a practical protocol to begin reducing visceral fat and restoring hormonal balance. First, prioritize resistance training 3 to 4 times per week. Compound movements, squats, push-ups, rows, deadlifts, increase muscle insulin sensitivity, and stimulate natural testosterone production. Even 30-40 minutes per session is effective. Second, increase daily protein intake to approximately 0.7 per 1 gram per pound of lean body mass. Protein preserves muscle during fat loss and stabilizes blood sugar. Third, reduce liquid calories completely. Alcohol, sweetened beverages, even excessive fruit juice. These preferentially drive visceral fat storage. Fourth, aim for 7,000 to 10,000 steps per day. Non-exercise movement significantly impacts fat distribution over time. Fifth, optimize micronutrients required for testosterone synthesis. Zinc, 1530 milliirons, vitamin D, target blood levels 40-60 nmol, and magnesium. Now I want you to understand something clearly. Belly fat is not just stored energy, it is hormonal interference. If you reduce visceral fat, testosterone often improves naturally. If testosterone improves, nitric oxide signaling strengthens. If nitric oxide signaling strengthens, erectile function improves. This is systems biology. You cannot separate sexual health from metabolic health. The third thing that quietly destroys erections is poor sleep, and more specifically, disrupted circadian rhythm. Most men underestimate this completely. They think sleep is about feeling rested. It's not. Sleep is when your endocrine system recalibrates. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Testosterone production follows a circadian rhythm. The majority of daily testosterone release occurs during deep sleep, particularly during the first few REM cycles of the night. If sleep is shortened, fragmented, or shifted too late, testosterone output drops measurably. What the research shows is striking. Even 1 week of restricting sleep to around 5 hours per night can reduce daytime testosterone levels by 10 to 15% in healthy young men. That's not aging, that's 1 week. Now let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your body runs a nightly repair factory. During deep sleep, growth hormone pulses, testosterone is synthesized, blood vessels repair microdamage, cortisol resets, insulin sensitivity improves. If you cut sleep short, it's like shutting down the factory before the repair shift finishes. Damage accumulates, hormones drift, inflammation rises, and erection quality declines. But it's not just testosterone. Sleep deprivation increases cortisol. Elevated cortisol constricts blood vessels and suppresses sexual signaling in the brain. It also increases insulin resistance, which, as we discussed, damages nitric oxide production. So now you have a triple hit. Lower testosterone, higher cortisol, impaired endothelial repair. Let's go deeper. During REM sleep, men experience nocturnal erections, sometimes 3 to 5 per night. These are not about sexual dreams. They serve a biological purpose. They oxygenate penile tissue and maintain elasticity. When sleep is disrupted, those nightly oxygenation cycles are reduced. Over time, that matters. If this is resonating with you so far, consider subscribing. I post daily science-driven content to help you optimize these systems naturally, not mask symptoms. Now let's talk about solutions. First, anchor your sleep schedule. Go to bed and wake up within the same 60-minute window every day, including weekends. Consistency strengthens circadian signaling. Second, eliminate blue light exposure at least 60 to 90 minutes before bed. Use warm lighting. Avoid scrolling in bed. Light exposure suppresses melatonin and shifts testosterone rhythms. Third, stop caffeine 8 hours before bedtime. Caffeine blocks adenosine receptors and delays deep sleep entry. Fourth, keep your bedroom cool, around 18 to 20 degrees Celsius, 64-68 degrees Celsius. Core body temperature must drop for deep sleep to occur. Fifth, consider magnesium glycinate or magnesium threonate in the evening to support relaxation and sleep architecture. Sixth, morning sunlight within 10-15 minutes of waking helps reset circadian rhythm and improves nighttime hormone release. Remember this clearly. You cannot out-supplement poor sleep. You cannot out-train poor sleep. You cannot out-medicate poor sleep. Sexual health is regenerative health. The fourth thing that quietly destroys erections is chronic psychological stress, and more specifically, chronically elevated cortisol. This one is subtle because many men normalize stress. They say, it's just work. It's just responsibility. It's just life. But here's what's really going on inside your body. When you perceive stress, whether it's financial pressure, relationship tension, lack of sleep, or constant digital stimulation, your brain activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Cortisol rises, adrenaline rises. Blood is shunted away from non-essential systems and toward survival systems. And in a survival state, reproduction is not a priority. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your nervous system has two modes. Mode 1, survival. Mode 2, reproduction and repair. You cannot fully activate both at the same time. Erections require parasympathetic dominance, the rest and digest branch of your nervous system. Stress activates the sympathetic branch, fight or flight. When cortisol is chronically elevated, several things happen simultaneously. First, cortisol constricts blood vessels. That directly impairs blood flow into penile tissue. Second, cortisol suppresses gonadotropin-releasing hormone in the brain, which reduces downstream testosterone production. Third, chronic stress increases inflammatory markers and oxidative stress, damaging endothelial cells and nitric oxide signaling. Fourth, elevated cortisol worsens insulin resistance, bringing us back to the first mechanism we discussed. So stress becomes a metabolic amplifier. You may be eating well, you may be exercising, but if your nervous system is chronically on edge, vascular relaxation becomes biologically harder. And there's another layer most people overlook. Chronic stress reduces dopamine sensitivity. Dopamine is critical for sexual motivation and arousal signaling. If dopamine signaling becomes blunted due to overstimulation, constant notifications, social media scrolling, late-night screen use, the brain's reward circuitry becomes less responsive. That means weaker signaling from brain to body. This is why many high-performing, ambitious men, outwardly healthy, struggle silently with erectile inconsistency. It's not weakness, it's neurobiology. So what do? First, create a daily nervous system reset ritual. Even 10 minutes of slow nasal breathing, inhale 4 seconds, exhale 6 seconds, lowers sympathetic tone and reduces cortisol. Second, strength train, but avoid overtraining. Excessive high-intensity sessions without recovery can increase cortisol further. Balance intensity with recovery days. Third, implement digital boundaries. No phone 30 minutes after waking, no phone 60 minutes before bed. Protect dopamine sensitivity. Fourth, prioritize sunlight exposure and outdoor walks. Natural light and low-intensity movement regulate cortisol rhythms. Fifth, consider adaptogenic support if appropriate. Ashwagandha, standardized extract, rhodiola or phosphatidylserine in the evening can help blunt excessive cortisol output in some individuals. And most importantly, build psychological recovery into your schedule the way you schedule meetings. Because here's the truth, an erection is not just vascular, it is neurological, it is hormonal, it is contextual. If your body thinks you're in a battlefield, it will not prioritize reproduction. The fifth thing that quietly destroys erections is alcohol, especially when it becomes frequent, even if it's labeled moderate. Now I want to be precise here. A single drink occasionally is not catastrophic, but regular intake, 3, 4, 5 nights per week, creates cumulative metabolic and hormonal stress that most men underestimate. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Alcohol is metabolized primarily in the liver. When you drink, your liver immediately shifts its priority to detoxifying ethanol into acetaldehyde, then into acetate. While this is happening, other critical metabolic functions are temporarily deprioritized, including hormone metabolism, blood sugar regulation, and lipid processing. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your liver is like a biochemical traffic controller. It regulates hormone balance, filters toxins, manages cholesterol, and stabilizes glucose. When alcohol enters the system, it's like an emergency vehicle forcing every other process to pull over. Repeated often enough, this disrupts hormonal equilibrium. What the research shows is that chronic alcohol intake lowers testosterone levels through multiple pathways. It directly impairs Leydig cell function in the testes, increases aromatase activity, converting testosterone into estrogen, and increases oxidative stress. It also raises cortisol. Now combine that with what we discussed earlier: lower testosterone, weaker nitric oxide signaling, higher estrogen, hormonal imbalance, higher cortisol, vasoconstriction, increased inflammation, endothelial dysfunction, and there's more. Alcohol impairs REM sleep. Even if you fall asleep faster, sleep architecture becomes fragmented. That means less nocturnal testosterone production and fewer nighttime erections, which, remember, are essential for maintaining tissue oxygenation and elasticity. Alcohol also worsens insulin sensitivity. It promotes visceral fat storage, particularly when combined with high-calorie meals, and it increases triglycerides, which contribute to vascular stiffness. So even if you don't feel the damage, the metabolic terrain shifts. If this has been helpful so far, consider subscribing. I post content like this every day to help you build health from the inside out, not rely on quick fixes. Now let's talk solutions. First, set a clear boundary. For most men struggling with erection quality, I recommend a 30-day alcohol reset. Not forever, just long enough to observe what changes. Second, if you reintroduce alcohol, keep it to 1 to 2 drinks maximum, no more than once or twice per week, and never within 3 hours of bedtime. Third, hydrate aggressively. For every alcoholic drink, add at least 1 full glass of water with electrolytes. Fourth, support liver function nutritionally. Prioritize cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, adequate protein intake, and consider nutrients like N-acetylcysteine, NAC, or milk thistle extract under professional guidance. Fifth, track morning energy, sleep quality, and erection quality during abstinence. The data often speaks for itself. Remember this clearly. Your liver regulates your hormones. Your hormones regulate nitric oxide. Nitric oxide regulates blood flow. Blood flow determines erection strength. Protect the liver. Protect the signal. In the final section, we're going to talk about one of the simplest but most powerful tools for restoring erectile health: movement. Because a sedentary lifestyle directly damages the inner lining of your blood vessels, and the solution is surprisingly accessible. Let's finish strong. The sixth and final thing that quietly destroys erections is prolonged sitting and physical inactivity. This one is deceptively simple. Many men think, I go to the gym 3 times per week, I'm active. But what matters just as much is what happens in the other 160 plus hours of the week. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your blood vessels are lined with a thin layer of cells called the endothelium. These cells produce nitric oxide, the molecule that allows blood vessels to relax and expand during an erection. Nitric oxide production is stimulated by something called shear stress, the frictional force of blood flowing across the vessel walls during movement. When you walk, climb stairs, lift weights, or even stand regularly, blood flow increases. That increased flow signals endothelial cells to produce more nitric oxide. It keeps the lining flexible, responsive, healthy. When you sit for long stretches, especially 6, 8, 10 hours per day, blood flow slows. Shear stress decreases. Endothelial responsiveness declines. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your blood vessels are like a flexible rubber band. If you stretch it regularly, it stays elastic. If you leave it unused in a drawer for months, it stiffens. Sedentary living stiffens your vascular system, and because penile arteries are small, about 1 to 2 millimeters in diameter, even minor endothelial dysfunction significantly impacts blood flow there first. What the research consistently shows is that regular moderate physical activity improves erectile function scores independent of medication use. In some cases, structured aerobic training has reversed mild to moderate erectile dysfunction over time. This makes sense biologically. Movement improves. Insulin sensitivity, testosterone levels, nitric oxide production, vascular elasticity, stress resilience, sleep quality. It addresses nearly every mechanism we've discussed. Now here's the key insight. You don't need extreme exercise. You need consistent movement. Here's a simple, sustainable protocol. First, Walk at least 8,000, 10,000 steps per day. If that feels high, start with 6,000 and build gradually. Second, interrupt sitting every 30-60 minutes. Stand, stretch, walk for 2 minutes. Set a timer if necessary. Third, include 150 minutes per week of moderate aerobic activity, brisk walking, cycling, swimming. Fourth, add resistance training 2 to 4 times per week. Muscle tissue improves glucose disposal and supports testosterone production. Fifth, incorporate short bursts of higher intensity once or twice per week, if medically appropriate. Brief intervals improve endothelial function dramatically. And here's something powerful. Even a single bout of moderate exercise increases nitric oxide availability for hours afterward. Your body responds quickly. Remember, movement is vascular medicine. Movement is metabolic medicine. Movement is hormonal medicine. Now let's bring everything together. Let's step back and see the pattern clearly. Erectile function is not isolated. It is a reflection of insulin sensitivity, testosterone balance, cortisol regulation, liver function, sleep quality, endothelial health. In other words, it is a barometer of systemic health. When erections weaken, your body is not betraying you. It is communicating. High insulin stiffens vessels. Visceral fat disrupts hormones. Poor sleep suppresses testosterone. Chronic stress constricts blood flow. Alcohol overloads the liver. Sedentary living weakens endothelial function. 6 inputs, 1 outcome. But here's the empowering part. Every single one of these factors is modifiable. You can stabilize insulin. You can reduce visceral fat. You can protect sleep. You can regulate stress. You can support your liver. You can move daily. And when you do, nitric oxide improves. Hormonal signaling improves. Vascular elasticity improves. Energy improves. Clarity improves. Longevity improves. This is not about chasing performance. It's about restoring physiology. So here's my challenge to you. Choose one lever from today's video. Just one. Maybe it's a 30-day alcohol reset. Maybe it's committing to 8,000 steps daily. Maybe it's protecting your sleep window. Maybe it's reducing refined carbohydrates. Implement it. Track how you feel. Observe your morning energy and erection quality. Let your body show you what works. Because optimization is not theory, it's feedback. If this added value, like the video and subscribe to join others who are optimizing their health naturally, without relying on medication as a first-line solution. Your body wants to function well. Give it the right inputs, and it will respond.